House of the Dragon is right around the corner, and recently George R.R. Martin stated that the new show will feature about 17 dragons. So before the series begins, I thought I would briefly cover each of the dragons alive during the Dance of the Dragons, the period of history that the show will be set in, and provide a couple of facts of who rode the dragons and which factions they supported. If you are unaware, the show is a prequel series to Game of Thrones and will be set about 170 years before the events of the main series. It will cover the Dance of the Dragons, a civil war that was raged over the succession to the Iron Throne between two main Targaryen factions, known as the Greens and the Blacks. The Blacks were supportive of Rhaenyra Targaryen, the firstborn child of King Viserys, through his first marriage. She was named the King's heir and was expected to follow him on the Iron Throne. However, the Blacks were opposed by the Greens, who were supportive of Aegon II Targaryen, the eldest son of King Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower through the king's second marriage. Many in the kingdom believed that the firstborn male was the true heir to the Iron Throne, and each side felt that their claim to the throne was just, which eventually led to civil war. Both sides boasted a number of dragons that essentially acted as weapons of mass destruction. A dragon was capable of obliterating armies almost single-handedly. However, most dragons remained in cities and castles to act as deterrents for any potential attacks. But as the civil war raged on, the dragons were more frequently dispatched to the field, where they would fight in epic, ferocious battles against dragons from the opposing side. During the Dance of the Dragons, there were about 21 dragons in total. So let's go over each of these dragons and speculate on when or if we are going to see them during the series. I will not be covering which dragons fought each other or how they died, but to explain each dragon and their rider, I will have to explain who the character is and their relevance to the other characters in the series. As many characters remarry, this could potentially spoil some minor events in the series. Just a forewarning, I am Australian, and some of these names are very difficult to pronounce. I've tried to keep my pronunciation consistent, but feel free to shred me in the comments below. Cheers. Let's get into it. For the remainder of the video, I will break the dragons down into their factions, either part of the Blacks, the Greens, Wild Dragons, or a Dragon Seed. If you're unaware, a Dragon Seed is a bastard of House Targaryen or House Balerion, who have successfully claimed and mounted a dragon, but more on them later. First off, I will cover the Blacks. Those who supported Rhaenyra Targaryen's claim on the Iron Throne were known as the Blacks, and the dragons under their control were as follows. Kicking things off for the Blacks is Caraxes, the Mount of Daemon Targaryen. Caraxes is going to be one of the main dragons we will see not just in Season 1, but throughout the course of the series. Caraxes was known as the Blood Worm, and the show looks like they are really leaning into giving each of the dragons a distinct design. Caraxes having a huge neck makes him one long boy compared to the other dragons, and it even looks like he has wings on his hind legs. Caraxes is blood red, huge, and lean. He will be one of the most formidable dragons at the start of the series, being a veteran of many battles. He is over 50 years old and was previously ridden by Aemon Targaryen during the Fourth Dornish War. We will get to see Daemon use Caraxes to carve out a kingdom for himself during the War for the Stepstones, a war that was fought for control of the Stepstones, a chain of islands between Westeros and Essos that held significant trade and strategic value. Corlys Velaryon, who owed much of his wealth to sea trade, had grown tiresome of the outrageous tolls his vessels were expected to pay to the Triarchy for safe passage through the Stepstones. Corlys sought the aid of Daemon Targaryen, who was eager to cover himself in renown and glory to claim the Stepstones. Daemon and Caraxes inflicted devastating losses for the Triarchy, eventually defeating them, and Daemon was proclaimed King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea. We will likely get to see a lot of this action in the first half of Season 1 of House of the Dragon. Next up is Syrax, the Mount of Rhaenyra Targaryen. Syrax will be another dragon heavily featured during Season 1 and beyond. Rhaenyra claimed the she-dragon Syrax as her mount, becoming a dragon rider at only age 7. Syrax was named after a goddess of old Valyria. Syrax has yellow scales and green eyes. Though large and formidable, Syrax was not a fearsome or battle-experienced dragon, so don't expect Syrax and Rhaenyra to be flying into many battles. For a time, Rhaenyra and her uncle Daemon used to fly daily, racing from King's Landing to Dragonstone. By the time of the Civil War, Syrax had grown fat and lazy after being kept within the dragon pit, which was essentially a stable for dragons in King's Landing. However, dragons that were kept in captivity were often restricted from growing as large as those that roamed free. Seasmoke, the mount of Laenor Velaryon, Rhaenyra's husband. Seasmoke has pale silver-grey scales and was a young dragon at the time of the Dance of the Dragons. For the House of the Dragon, it looks like they might have beefed up Laenor and Seasmoke's roles, specifically in the War for the Stepstones. As previously mentioned, Corlys Velaryon, Laenor's father, desired to depose the Triarchy, who held control of the Stepstones, and it makes sense to include Laenor and Seasmoke during this campaign. So we will likely get to see both Caraxes and Seasmoke making short work of the Triarchy in Season 1. I think we might have already seen Seasmoke in the trailer. Initially, I thought this was Caraxes, but on second inspection, I don't think the neck or colouring is correct, and now I believe this is Laenor and Seasmoke. Vermax, the mount of Jacaerys Velaryon, the eldest son of Rhaenyra and Laenor Velaryon. Due to their dark hair and features, rumours that Jacaerys and his brothers were bastards, born of Harwin Strong and not Laenor, began to swirl around the kingdom. To dispel these rumours, King Viserys Targaryen decreed that a dragon egg was to be placed in the cradle of each of the children to prove their lineage. It was Targaryen tradition to place an egg within the cradle of a newborn child, with the intent to prompt the dragon egg to hatch and a lasting bond between the dragon and the rider to be formed. The egg placed in Jacaerys' cradle hatched into Vermax. At the onset of the Dance of the Dragons, Jacaerys was dispatched first to the Eyrie to gain the support of House Arryn, and then on to Winterfell in the north to treat with Cregan Stark and raise support for his mother Rhaenyra's claim to the Iron Throne. It is rumoured to ensure the support of House Stark, he married Sarah Snow, a bastard sister of Cregan Stark, and signed a pact of ice and fire, in which it was agreed that their firstborn daughter would marry Cregan Stark's son and heir, Rickon Stark. It was also rumoured that Vermax laid a clutch of eggs in the crypts of Winterfell, which adds to the mystery of the crypts in the main series. Some even theorised that the eggs within the crypts hatched when the Boltons burnt Winterfell. During the second book, A Clash of Kings, we get a chapter where Bran is walking into summer and witnesses a great winged snake, whose roar was a river of flame, in the skies above Winterfell as it burned. Though this is likely just George R.R. Martin using poetic language to describe how a direwolf sees the world. For example, a direwolf would refer to a human with a sword as a human with a long sharp claw or tooth. I think we will get to see Jacaerys and Vermax given the task to secure the support of House Arryn and House Stark near the end of Season 1. Moving on to Arrax, the mount of Lucerys Velaryon, the second-born son of Rhaenyra and Laenor Velaryon. Lucerys, like his brother, had a dragon egg placed in his cradle to dispel the rumours of his parentage. The egg placed in his cradle hatched into Arrax, who was pearlescent white with yellow flames and golden eyes. Arrax was a young dragon, between 10 and 15 years old at the beginning of the dance. At the start of the Dance of the Dragons, Rhaenyra's two eldest sons were dispatched to the great lords of Westeros to raise support for her claim, while Lucerys' older brother was given the more difficult journey to secure the Vale of Arryn and the North. Lucerys himself was sent to Storm's End to treat with Boris Baratheon. However, things go awry. We will almost certainly see Arrax towards the end of Season 1. Tyraxes, the mount of Joffrey Velaryon, the third-born and youngest son of Rhaenyra and Laenor Velaryon. Tyraxes hatched from an egg placed in Joffrey's cradle when he was young, just as his two elder brothers had. Tyraxes, being younger and smaller than Arrax and Vermax, was large enough to ride, but not so large to be taken into combat. For this reason, and Joffrey's young age, his mother Rhaenyra forbade Joffrey from taking part in the war. If we see Tyraxes in Season 1, it will be as a very young beast, but I think we are more likely to see him in Season 2 and beyond. Next up we have Meleys, known as the Red Queen, the mount of Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Meleys was previously the mount of Alyssa Targaryen, Viserys and Daemon's mother. Upon Alyssa's death, Meleys remained riderless for several years before being claimed by Rhaenys. She had scarlet scales and pink wing membranes, which granted her the nickname the Red Queen. In her younger years, Meleys was considered the swiftest dragon in all of Westeros. By the time of the Dance of the Dragons, Meleys was an older beast, though she was still fearsome and cunning, being no stranger to battle. Rhaenys was a bit of a badass herself, and when she married Corlys Velaryon, she insisted on arriving to her wedding atop Meleys. During the Dance of the Dragons, Rhaenys rode Meleys in support of Rhaenyra and the Blacks. We will almost certainly see Meleys in Season 1, though she will have a more significant and epic role in Season 2 and beyond. Moondancer, the Mount of Baelor Targaryen, the daughter of Daemon Targaryen and Laena Velaryon. Moondancer was pale green, large enough to be ridden, but not so large to be considered battle-ready. Being only 13 at the time of the dance, Baelor and Moondancer stayed out of the Dance of the Dragons for the first 2 years, with the pair safely hidden on Dragonstone. However, they are eventually forced to flee Dragonstone and fight a fierce battle with Sunfyre, the Mount of Aegon II Targaryen, the son of Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower, though don't expect this battle to happen until the end of Season 2 or during Season 3. Morning is the Mount of Rhaenyra Targaryen, the daughter of Daemon Targaryen and Laena Velaryon. Morning is a pale pink she-dragon. She was hatched during the Dance of the Dragons, and the Greens were greatly troubled by this, fearing the small folk would consider the Blacks more legitimate due to the dragon's birth. I would not expect to see Morning until well into the series, perhaps Season 4 or even beyond. Stormcloud is the Mount of Aegon III Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Younger, the son of Daemon and Rhaenyra Targaryen. For much of the conflict, Stormcloud and Aegon the Younger were safely fostered in Essos away from the conflict, but they are eventually forced to return to Westeros. I don't expect to see Stormcloud until Season 3 or beyond. So that about does it for the dragons under the control of the Blacks. Now onto the Greens, who supported Aegon II Targaryen, the eldest son of Viserys and Alicent Hightower. Sunfyre is the Mount of Aegon II Targaryen, known as Aegon the Elder, the eldest son of Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower, also making him the half-brother of Rhaenyra Targaryen. According to some, Sunfyre was the most beautiful dragon in the known world. His scales gleamed gold and shone like beaten gold in the sunlight. So marvelous was Sunfyre that Aegon II took a 3-headed golden dragon as his personal sigil instead of the classic red dragon of House Targaryen. I expect to see Sunfyre in Season 1. Although we haven't seen him in trailers, I think the showrunners don't want to spoil his magnificence. He will be featured more heavily in Season 2 and onwards, participating in many battles. Next up we have Vhagar, the Mount of Aemon Targaryen, the younger brother of Aegon II and the second son of Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower, again making him the half-brother of Rhaenyra Targaryen. Vhagar is the oldest living dragon at the time of the dance. Once the Mount of Visenya Targaryen, Vhagar, along with Balerion and Caraxes, were used during Aegon's conquest to conquer the Seven Kingdoms. By the time of the Dance of the Dragons, Vhagar is the survivor of 100 battles, and had grown to be almost as large as Balerion the Black Dread. Her roar alone was so powerful it could shake the very foundations of Storm's End. No living dragon could match her size or ferocity. However, in the process of claiming Vhagar, Aemond would lose an eye, though not in the way you might think. In many ways, Vhagar and Aemond were the Greens' answer for Daemon and Caraxes, with both pair essentially acting as the military might for each faction. Vhagar will certainly be in Season 1, and I believe we have already seen her in the trailers in this segment. Dreamfyre, the Mount of Helaena Targaryen, sister to Aegon II and Aemon Targaryen, being the daughter of King Viserys and Alicent Hightower. Dreamfyre was hatched at the time of Aegon the Conqueror's reign, making her almost 100 years old by the start of the Dance of the Dragons. Dreamfyre was pale blue with silver markings. Despite being one of the oldest and largest dragons, Dreamfyre was held within the dragon pit for much of the Dance of the Dragons, acting more as a deterrent for a potential attack. We might catch a glimpse of her in Season 1 in the Dragon Pit, but I would not expect to see her until Season 2 or maybe even Season 3. Tessarion, the Mount of Daeron Targaryen, the son of Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower, which makes him the younger brother of Aegon II, Aemond and Helaena Targaryen. Tessarion was known as the Blue Queen for her spectacular cobalt colouring. She was a relatively young dragon at the time of the dance, and was the youngest battle-ready dragon of the Greens. She participates in many of the battles during the Dance of the Dragons, though I would not expect to see her until Season 2 and beyond. Shrykos was the mount of Jaehaerys Targaryen, the firstborn son of Aegon II and his sister wife Helaena Targaryen. Shrykos was a very young she-dragon, and was not of a size to be mounted or flown in battle by Jaehaerys. She resided within the Dragon Pit for much of the Dance of the Dragons. I would not expect to see her until Season 3 or 4, Morghul, and was the mount of Jaehaerys Targaryen, the daughter of Aegon II and his sister wife Helaena Targaryen. Like Shrykos, Morghul was very young at the time of the Dance of the Dragons, and was not of a size to be mounted or flown into battle by Jaehaerys. Morghul resided in the Dragon Pit. Again, I would not expect to see her until Season 3 or 4. So that about does it for the Dragons of the Greens. Next up, we have the wild dragons. The Cannibal was a wild dragon that lived on Dragonstone during the Dance of the Dragons. He was named the Cannibal as he would often feast on dead dragons, newborn dragons, and even dragon eggs. He was huge, coal-black with menacing green eyes. Being the largest and oldest of the wild dragons, his exact age is unknown. Some of the small folk of Dragonstone even claimed he lived on the island before the Targaryens settled it, which could mean he is even older than Balerion the Black Dread. During the Dance of the Dragons, many dragons became riderless, and the Blacks offered lands, riches, and a knighthood on any dragon seed, a bastard of House Targaryen or House Velaryon, who could tame and mount a dragon. Many attempted to mount the Cannibal, all failed. I don't think we'll get to see the Cannibal until we get to the Dragon Seeds, which likely won't be until Season 3 or onwards. But when we do get to see him, he will be monstrous and will likely be the most ferocious of all the dragons. The Grey Ghost was another wild dragon. He was pale grey-white, the colour of morning mist. He was notably shy and avoided people, so not much is known about him. We might get to see the Grey Ghost in Season 2. Next up, we have the Dragons of the Dragon Seeds. As the war dragged on, many dragon riders had been slain, leaving some dragons riderless. Additionally, a number of wild dragons existed that were considered battle-ready. For this reason, the Blacks offered lands, riches, and a knighthood on any dragon seed, a bastard of House Targaryen or House Velaryon, who could master a dragon. Many tried to claim these riderless dragons, only a handful succeeded. Sheepstealer was a wild dragon, with a certain preference for mutton, hence the name. Sheepstealer was mud-brown and not aggressive towards humans unless provoked. Despite his placid nature, Sheepstealer was still a wild beast, and many died attempting to claim and mount him. Eventually, a girl named Nettles managed to tame the great beast by offering the dragon a freshly killed sheep every morning. The dragon became accustomed to Nettles and allowed her to mount him. Nettles and Sheepstealer fought in many of the great battles during the Dance of the Dragons, and joined Prince Daemon Targaryen and his dragon Caraxes in hunting Aemon Targaryen and Vhagar, who had been setting the countryside on fire. I would not expect to see Sheepstealer and Nettles until Season 3 or later. Next of the Dragon Seeds, we have Ulf White, who mounted Silverwing. Silverwing was previously the mount of Queen Alysanne Targaryen, the wife of Jaehaerys I. Silverwing had remained riderless for almost 3 decades, before finally being claimed by Ulf White, which granted him riches, lands, and a knighthood by the Blacks. Silverwing was described as having silver scales and was considered relatively docile. Ulf used Silverwing in a handful of battles during the Dance of the Dragons, but again, I would not expect to see the pair until Season 3 or beyond. The last of the Dragon Seeds was Hugh Hammer, who mounted Vermithor. Previously, Vermithor was the mount of King Jaehaerys I Targaryen until his death. Vermithor had remained riderless for almost 3 decades, remaining on Dragonstone, making his lair within one of the many smoking caverns. Hugh Hammer eventually claimed Vermithor, and like Silverwing, was used in a number of battles during the Dance of the Dragons, but we will not see him until Season 3 or beyond. Although long dead by the start of the series, we might get to see the greatest Targaryen dragon to have ever lived, Balerion the Black Dread, the mount of Aegon the Conqueror, his son Maegor the Cruel, and finally Viserys, the king of the 7 kingdoms at the beginning of the series. Viserys claimed Balerion when he was 16 years old. He flew him around King's Landing twice and then landed. He intended to fly Balerion to Dragonstone, but felt the dragon would not make the trip. By this point, Balerion was very old, around 200 years, and had even stopped growing. Balerion died a year later, and Viserys never bonded with another dragon. In the trailer, we see Viserys playing with what looks like a Balerion toy or figure, and we also get to see Balerion's absolutely huge skull. The showrunners have indicated that they intend to use flashbacks as a storytelling device, so we might get to see Balerion and Viserys in such a flashback. Perhaps we will get a heartfelt scene of him talking to Balerion's skull, as one might reminisce over a deceased pet. Alternatively, the trailer has hinted that Viserys has dragon dreams, prophetic visions of the future steeped in symbolism, where more often than not, characters are represented by dragons or a manifestation of their sigil. For example, a Stark could take the form of a direwolf, and for a Targaryen, it makes sense that their dream self is represented by their dragon. So this is an interesting way that we could not only see Balerion, but a lot of the other dragons early in the series. Although I think this would be an amazing spectacle, I don't think it is very likely that we will get to see Balerion. But hey, a guy can dream. So that about does it for the dragons alive during the Dance of the Dragons in the books. Again, George R.R. Martin stated that there are about 17 dragons that will appear throughout the duration of the series, which means of the 21 I have just listed, 4 will be cut. I think the most likely candidates to be cut are Tessarion, Shrykos, Morghul, maybe Tyraxes, and potentially Silverwing, though I hope they don't diminish the Dragon Seed plotline. But who knows? As the series progresses, maybe they will increase the total amount of dragons shown in the House of the Dragon. Only time will tell. But what do you think? Which dragon are you most looking forward to seeing? Comment below.